Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of Roundabout Sports presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media, where our passion is our profession. Thank you so much for joining us on, well, here in Missouri, it's a rainy Wednesday night, but I hope it's sunny where you're tuning in, folks. I'm the maestro, Jeremy Karp, alongside the hardest working man in show business, Hollywood James Knox. James, how you feeling, buddy?
Uh, I felt better, but I'm here and hanging in.
Yep.
So let's get her going.
All right. Well, folks, we're telling you, it's going to be an amazing show tonight. Later on, we're going to have an exclusive interview with Taylor Michell Coleman, the daughter of Cardinal Hall of Famer Vince Coleman. And we're going to be talking about her new book. It's called A Letter to My Deadbeat Dad. The Facade is Over. And this is what it looks like. You can buy it on Amazon.com. And there's a lot to delve into. We've talked with Taylor before the show, talked with her in the days prior. I've talked to her many times. There's a lot to unearth. It's going to be definitely an emotional, in-depth interview, and I know I'm looking forward to it, and I know she is as well. So before that, though, we got some playoffs to talk about, James, and I know it was an interesting wild card weekend, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, we had epic comeback / collapses. Right. You have just an absolute terrible performance by Tom Brady. We saw a Miami team with their third string quarterback Skylar Thompson almost find a way to beat the Buffalo Bills. And then when, of course, Seattle and San Francisco, Seattle has the lead at halftime, and San Francisco kind of just pulls away and doesn't look back. It kind of was the I guess epitome of this NFL season. We saw a lot of things that we unexpected. We saw stupid penalties, and we saw bad officiating, which is probably taboo to talk about. Well, I would think that this year and this weekend in general, you've got to have better officiating in games to come, because these games mean so much now.
It was not always the Jags. Don't even. I will say, I don't think it was always the Jags, but I also don't think the Jaguars should have been ever counted out. It was not always them because, the Chargers, Trevor Lawrence literally had 4 interceptions in the first half. You can't tell me it's always the Jags when he throws 4 interceptions.
He had more interceptions thrown in the first half than he did completions. And, I get that. And look, Jags history puts that on there, but I also know that at one point in time, he sent me a text message saying he was turning the game off, that he put music on and just stared at the wall. So I don't want to hear the fact that it was always the Jags. No, and it was. I think that Bosa's comments, I mean, he says the officiating was bad, but yet he takes one of the biggest bonehead penalties by chucking his helmet after the fact. Yeah. And, there were some pass interference calls that, while I understand the letter of the law, and I also understand that these referees that work for either Fox, ESPN, or NBC or CBS, they're going to always side with the officiating for the most part. They're never going to say anything against one of the guys that they either refed with, or they're a brotherhood, and I understand that if anybody does about officiating, being close like that. But it was bad. But then we saw Trevor Lawrence turn it around in the second half, and I mean, you're down 27-0. You probably should have been down a lot more, and I know we'll preview this weekend's games. Trevor Lawrence starts that way against Kansas City, and there will be no comeback.
A lot of credit over these past few weeks has to go as well to the defense of Jacksonville.
Right.
I mean, against the Titans, against the Cowboys, now against the Chargers, even if they come out starting looking flat, they go out there and they just completely dominate the second half of football games. And, this isn't no backup quarterback we're talking about here. This isn't no Josh Dobbs, who's only starting his second game ever. This is straight up Justin Herbert, one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. I think now the Chargers did fire Joe Lombardi, their offensive coordinator. I understand why they didn't fire Brandon Staley. I do understand it, but I also think he's still hindering Justin Herbert because at the same time, and it's not even just Herbert, it's the whole team. There is nobody knows the phrase take the points less than he does.
Yeah, and I mean there were a couple situations in that game where he mismanaged the offense, mismanaged downs, and not going for the points. And Brandon Staley's an odd coach. Of course, he got his start. He was the defensive coordinator under Sean McVay and the Rams when they went to the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And everybody's like, "Oh, well, he's going to get a head coaching job. He's a great coach." But this is how I equate it. Not every good coordinator is going to be a head coach. It's similar to not every good student is a good teacher. Not every good student who is a great math student that knows algebra, geometry, trig, all of that, they can't always teach it because they think they know it so well, it's hard to convey it. So not every coordinator is a good head coach. I mean, we've seen this with Dan Quinn, great defensive coordinator in Dallas. He was a great defensive coordinator before he went there. He was a terrible head coach in Atlanta, just ridiculously bad. And, you kind of look at a guy like Raheem Morris, who, well, he's kind of the opposite. He's a better head coach than he is a defensive coordinator. So, yeah. But it's vice, it works hand in hand that just because you're good at one spot doesn't mean you're going to be good at the other. And I think Brandon Staley, you almost feel with him as a head coach that you need somebody there is just like a common sense management coach. Because, I mean, this started last year. I remember the Thursday night game against Kansas City where they should have very well won that game, but he mismanaged his offense. He mismanaged the time. And even a couple of times where he mismanaged the play clock rather when it comes to downs. So, I get why they didn't fire him because maybe they want stability there, but he is definitely hindering Justin Herbert. There's no way Justin Herbert becomes a great offensive force under a defensively minded and defensively based coach.
I mean, it's just honestly hard to find a way. He's fortunate. And also, Brandon Staley should also, in my opinion, I think another reason he's still very much on a hot seat is, I mean, look what he's done to Mike Williams, for example.
Goodness gracious.
Forced him to play a meaningless game. He got injured. He missed, the wild card game, which put him in the wild card game over week 18 any day of the week. And then some. Look,
you have to think that if Mike Williams played, they win that game. And this is how I say that, because the Jacksonville Jaguars in the first half, they had a hard enough time managing Keenan Allen and Gerald Everett because Gerald Everett had a huge game. Now, if you take those two weapons and then you put another wide receiver out there, it spreads the Jaguars defense out even more. And maybe you don't get some of the big defensive plays that you made. And Herbert has another option where you can get the ball out quicker. Jags history makes the comment that Doug Peterson should be coach of the year. He took the worst team in the league for 2 seasons to the playoffs. And I agree with the comment that he says if the Chargers had Williams, I think the Jags wouldn't have come back just because it's another weapon out there that you have to try to stop defensively. I think it's going to be, Doug Peterson, remember, so the coach of the year is a regular season award. It's kind of similar to how MVPs and stuff are decided in baseball. All that side is a regular season.
Everything's a regular season.
And it's going to be hard to find another coach of the year over Doug Peterson. But, you look at Brian Dable and what he's done with the Giants and then the Giants beat, ended up beating Minnesota in the first round. I think Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia has done a great job. And you kind of look at, you just
how you missing my man Dan Campbell, man.
I'm getting to Dan Campbell. Well, the thing is Dan Campbell didn't make the playoffs, sure, and they did have a terrible start to the season. And I love Dan Campbell. It's great to see that he's had coaches that have had the option of leaving, players that have had the option of leaving, and they said, no, we'll take less money, or we will take less opportunity to come back to Detroit because of something they're building. We all laughed at Dan Campbell and the biting kneecap comment, but he's building a culture in Detroit that Detroit has not, I don't think, seen in a very long time, if at all.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the coach of the year candidates that you had just mentioned. I mean, Brian Dable is probably, to me, the one that's going to win, just because, Jacksonville had very good pieces in place. And we all knew a big problem was Urban Meyer. So you get him out of the equation. You put a solid coach like Doug Peterson in, one that anybody can rally around. But the Giants, they go in there with the lowest of expectations. Well, they don't, but everybody else, myself included, lowest of expectations. And they completely shock everybody. And 3/4 of the NFC East are still in the playoffs as we head into the divisional round. 3/4 of them. And then you got Washington.
Well, Washington had a chance to make the playoffs if they
don't
start Carson Wentz. And if you stay with Taylor Heineke, if you stay with Taylor Heineke instead of starting Carson Wentz, you have a good chance of making the playoffs. So you look at what Dable did with the team that had a very questionable Saquon Barkley. Nobody knew if he was going to be able to bounce back and become the running back that he had been in the past. Danny Dimes had struggled in the past. Nobody had an idea or a clue of what he was going to be. And then, name one wide receiver on that team other than Slayton. Kenny Golladay doesn't count because he didn't show up half the time anyway.
Hodgins.
Well,
okay. I get what you're saying.
Right. And, when we looked at it, sure, the defense looked okay. You had Kayvon Thibodeau and some other weapons defensively. But you're right. I mean, the Jags had a good defense. They on offense, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, former Giant. And, it's funny that we look at it now saying, well, Jacksonville was in a better spot than the Giants, but they were, especially when it comes to talent.
Absolutely. And, you look at the Giants and they go, and we'll move to the Giants as they go to Minnesota to face off against the Vikings.
We called this.
Of course, we both called this. The Giants would upset the Vikings. And in the weird way, is it really that much of an upset? Because let's really put this in perspective. And this isn't taking away from the Vikings. The Vikings are a very good team. And I feel bad for Kirk Cousins, but at the same time,
13-4.
Yeah. At the same time, the Vikings are just one of those teams that got to where they're at by the skin of their teeth. How many one-score games? It's the equivalent of if the Cardinals won 7 games in a row by 1 run or by 2 or fewer runs. The Vikings won over half of their games this year by 1 score or by less than 7 points.
They were 11-0. 11 out of 13 wins in the regular season. 11-0 in games decided by 1 score or less. Now, if you count the playoffs, they are 11-1. So back to what we were talking about coordinators not always being great head coaches. So Kevin O'Connell was underneath Sean McVay in Los Angeles again, was the quarterback coach / offensive coordinator. And boy, what kind of a play call on 4th and 8 are you throwing a 3-yard out pattern to your tight end?
I think one thing that with that, McConnell he's shown he can work well with the offense. The problem is, I think one of those receivers was meant to be a crosser. There is no way you literally called it to where everybody run deep except TJ Hawkinson, who will go 3 yards out, and we'll just see what the hell happens. And yeah, Jack's history brings up the exact same question you do. And I don't really understand how that even happened. That is not the type of play successful playoff teams make. And also, you look at this game, the Giants came in there with so much more energy.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
And big time.
And Minnesota's defense couldn't have stopped the nosebleed. I mean, that was ridiculous. I mean, Saquon Barkley had his way. We talk about Saquon and not knowing what you had. He looked like the Pro Bowler from, his rookie year. He looked like that definitive back in the backfield that can cause all sorts of problems. And I think he causes problems for Philadelphia this coming weekend. I really do. I don't know if I'd go out on that limb and say that they beat the Eagles, but, Saquon had the kind of game that reminded you of why he is an RB1. And, Minnesota, there was so many schematic issues on both sides of the ball this past weekend. And, you talk about another defensive coordinator that might need to be fired. Minnesota's might need to be standing on the unemployment line as well.
Yeah, and after that big performance, Daniel Jones, first player in NFL history to have 2 passing touchdowns, 70 rushing yards, a touchdown, and I think over 270 yards, if I got all that correct.
You are correct.
A big chunk of that, I know. And this is a guy who wasn't even guaranteed to be the starting quarterback. They declined his 5th-year option heading into this season. And, when I look at it now, I say to myself, you know what? I was doing some research and I found out Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, and Andrew Thomas all share the same favorite candy bar.
Yeah, good call.
Because guess what? Whenever their season ends, whether it ends in a Super Bowl win or it ends this weekend, the Giants have their core players and they're going to get paid because they've earned it. Saquon in the running for comeback player of the year. Danny Dimes, amazing, like a underrated dual threat quarterback.
Maybe we need to start calling him Danny Dollars.
Yeah, Danny Dimes is going to become Danny Dollars. And then, Andrew Thomas, who had a terrible start to his career, really buckling down. And I think the new coaching staff has just instilled so much trust in him that it's helped him out, because football is just as much a mental game as it is a physical game. And, John Madden always said 90% of the game is half mental.
Right. Right.
So, I take a look at this Giants team, and they are just so fun to root for. And looking back on it, I do feel bad I predicted them to go 3-14, because honestly, this is a fun team to watch. They just are so invigorating. They got such great positive vibes. And the best part is every team that talks trash ahead of them, they've proven wrong. And on top of this, like you said, they're playing the Eagles because the Cowboys are going to be playing the Niners. And we're about to get to that. But the Giants are playing the Eagles. I'm not going to act like the Giants are that big of an underdog in this. I know Jalen Hurts is back, but at the same time, the Eagles have overall just really slept into the playoffs. They dominated the majority of the season. Let's not take that away. They're the top seed for a reason. But the last 2 weeks, they just kind of hit the snooze button on the alarm clock and just let themselves get in the postseason.
Well, let's look at the fact that in week 17, the Giants almost beat the Eagles with a backup with Davis Webb as their backup quarterback, as their starter. Because remember, the Giants had already clinched the playoff spot and they sat everybody. So,
yeah, they played smart. They sat everyone.
Right. And the Giants have confidence going into this game, knowing, hey, look, we didn't start Daniel Jones. We didn't play Saquon Barkley, and we still almost beat you. And that's with Jalen Hurts coming back, in Jags history. So he said it. He goes, I think the Giants will upset the Eagles. And when I had him on the strike, when I had Jags history on the strike zone last week, he picked the Giants to beat the Vikings as well. So, this is one of those things too. It's a divisional matchup. The hardest thing to do in sports is to beat a team 3 times in the season. And we've seen that. And this comes the situation where the Giants will go to Philadelphia, and this is the 3rd time they're playing this year. This is going to be a great game to watch. And I believe that's a Sunday afternoon game, if I'm correct.
Yes. And the thing of it is, because I know the Jaguars play the Chiefs Saturday afternoon.
Yep, that's 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central.
Right. And, I look at and it'll be, the Giants-Eagles is Saturday night.
Oh, we're going to have, that's a hell of a doubleheader then to kick off the divisional round of the playoffs.
Yeah, so it'll be the Chiefs and Jaguars at 3:30 Central Time, and then at 7 p.m. Central, it'll be the Giants and the Eagles on
Boy.
NBC. And I'm telling you, that's going to look, I got it right now though. I got Chiefs and I got Giants. I'm not going to lie. I think the Giants upset the number 1 seed in this. The momentum train is just so high right now. And add in the fact that I feel like I said, I feel like the Eagles are limping into this game. I don't know. It's just something seems off about this team.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, one, they had the bye week, and they may have had the chance to sit everybody and you can game plan. And you could say the same thing about the Chiefs and the Jags because they're playing again for another time this season. I don't think the first round bye, now that you play 17 games, I don't think the first round bye matters as much. I really don't. I mean, I know you're starting off at home and, if you're the 1 seed, you have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. But, I'm with you with the fact that I think the Giants can beat the Eagles. In Jags history, he goes, of course, he thinks the Jags-Chiefs game will be closer than the regular season. But, the Chiefs beat the Jaguars by 10 points, and the Jaguars are not the same Jags team that we saw then. The Chiefs have struggled with teams like Denver and like Houston, even though they won those games. Like, I think the Chiefs and I think the Eagles come out as victors this weekend, but it would not surprise me to see the Giants beat the Eagles. And it honestly wouldn't surprise me to see the Jags beat the Chiefs either.
I mean, as long as the Chiefs defense buckles down and hangs in there in that second half, we'll see how it goes.
Yep.
Now,
both games can be really close.
Both games can be really close. Now, I'll tell you about a game that definitely wasn't close. We have a couple more wild card games to get through. Well, 3 more. The first one, it's quite simple. I think we saw the last of Tom Brady on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. After Dallas won 31-14, which 2 interesting facts of that game. First off, keep in mind I'm going to be 28 this year. This was the first time in my life the Cowboys won a road playoff game. Number 2, this was the first time Tom Brady has ever lost to the Dallas Cowboys.
Wait a minute. Hang on. You're going to be 28 this year. This would be the first time in your lifetime you've seen Dallas win a playoff game.
Shit, it sure feels like it.
1992.
That was not the last time they won a playoff game. There's no way. I think there's a game
they made it to the Super Bowl in 94. I'm being facetious, but
I was gonna say, because you already know, but they hadn't won a road playoff game since 93.
Right.
So I had never seen that in my life. And now and this was not, first off, aside from the fact that Brett Maher couldn't kick, to save his life, missing, let's see, 1, no, 2, no, 3, no, 4 extra points.
Cowboys signed another kicker today too as a safety plan.
Yeah, I might as well put a safety in there and had him kick. There was just no energy coming out of Tampa Bay. People thought with Jensen coming back at center, Tom Brady would have a strong, healthy offensive line, but the team just fell flat from the get-go. And I expected more out of the offense. The defense, I mean, Tampa Bay's always known for having an amazing defense. That's their signature. It's kind of like the Ravens, and we'll get to them shortly. But the Buccaneers completely fell flat. Tom Brady fell flat. It wasn't until the end that they finally started to get something going. But even then, Mike Evans dropping an easy touchdown pass after a successful onside kick, which could have made it, 31-21. And at that point, I know it's like so unlikely, but you're at least talking about a reasonable realm for something interesting to happen. But instead, you just absolutely crap the bed. And, you and I were talking about this before the show, about Tom Brady's post-game presser with the media afterwards.
Yep.
And, you referred back to when he was with the Patriots, in his last game, which was also a playoff loss. And I look at the 2 press conferences, the one when he was with the Patriots after he lost to Tennessee. Patriots fought hard that game. That was a hell of a game that just at the end of the day, Tom Brady threw a game-ending pick 6, a game-sealing one for Tennessee. He's like, well, I figure I'm going to keep playing in the NFL. I just don't know if it's here in New England. I've never seen Tom Brady so dejected and defeated in my life than I did a couple nights ago after the Cowboys game. This dude sounded so out of it. And, I just sense his time with Tampa Bay is done. I know Vegas is wanting him. I know the Dolphins are on the radar. I know some other teams have him on the radar. I do think Vegas or the Dolphins are the most likely destinations. Nevertheless, I 100% believe he's no longer going to be playing in Tampa Bay.
I agree with you. And, I would like to think that Buccaneers-Cowboys game Monday night it could have gone differently if on the first drive the Buccaneers go down and score a touchdown. Instead, Tom Brady throws his first red zone interception since 2019 with the Patriots. And, if they score a touchdown there, you're up 7-6 because, as you mentioned, Brett Maher couldn't hit the broadside of a barn kicking field goals. So I think that would have changed things a little bit. But, and I don't think so. I mean, Jags history says Brady probably was thinking after the game, why did I come back? I don't think so. I really don't. I think that, we've seen that Tom Brady, even on different teams, when he hasn't had a reliable offensive line, he's struggled. And that's true for any quarterback. Matt Stafford had the same issue this year. You win the Super Bowl last year, and then this year, you have all these injuries. Your offensive line gets shuffled. You had 12 different offensive line combinations, and Stafford ended up injured himself. When you have an issue where, your offensive line is shuffled and you don't have continuity up there and you don't, know who's going to be playing on a week-to-week basis, that's tough. And Brady, I think, he still definitely has the arm strength to throw the ball downfield. We've seen that. But I don't even think that if he goes to the Raiders, it's about the weapons. You need to make sure that he's got an offensive line that can protect him, that he can where he has time to get the ball to Devontae Adams or Hunter Renfrow or Waller at the tight end position. And if he goes to Miami, then you've got all the weapons there. I mean, you think Tom Brady throwing the ball to a Waddle or a Tyreek Hill. Yeah, right. I mean, and then you've got a running game when you've got the two-headed monster of Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. So, Brady in his mind is a competitor, and we know that being a competitor is somewhat of an addiction. And I certainly think it's an addiction for Tom Brady. You have that burning desire to go out and compete and try to win. And Brady, there is no way in hell. It's not going to be in Tampa, but there is absolutely no way in hell he's going to let his legacy go out as being, what we saw Monday night and getting just boat raced by Dallas. It's not happening.
That's what I'm saying. That's not his career's not ending like that.
No.
Now, speaking of teams that could use a quarterback right about now, let's go down to the jungle in Cincinnati where the Ravens definitely need a quarterback. No, because the Bengals don't. They got Joe Burrow. They got him. He's all set. The Bengals are set. Can't say the same for the Ravens. You want to talk about how a player values himself. And we're about to get it. And after we cover this game and then the Niners game, we're going to talk about Lamar. And, you talk about a guy that bets on himself and shows how valuable he is to a team. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that's more valuable to his team than Lamar Jackson is to the Ravens, because ever since he's gotten hurt, the team has absolutely played flat football. And, I mean, I think to sum up the Ravens season, the fact they were even in the playoffs is mind-boggling, or they lost. But to me, it was basically the game clincher when Tyler Huntley jumped over the running backs or the linemen, which you should not have run that play. If you have three running backs behind you, do not sneak the ball. Fake it to the left, hand it off to the right, or fake it to the left, toss it behind you. Do something, or even do a bootleg outside. But there ain't no reason in hell, if there's three guys behind you, you're going to sneak the ball in. And so he jumps over the offensive lineman. What does basically happen? The ball gets tipped out of his hand, swatted into Sam Hubbard's hands, and he runs all the way back home for a touchdown. And the crowd is absolutely raucous. They are on fire. And that was basically all she wrote for Baltimore. And now they enter the offseason with the whole question about Lamar. And all I'm going to say is that'll be to be continued in a couple minutes, because, James, I just know how you feel about how lost this Ravens team looked.
And they did. I mean, they looked off kilter and just kind of out of sorts. And look, this is nothing against Tyler Huntley. I mean, he kept that team competitive in that game. Now, the play call was not for him to jump over the line. The play call was for him to go low and to try to sneak it in that way. If he does, he probably scores. I don't know if the Bengals have enough time to go down and score and win the game. And we're talking about how the Ravens upset the Bengals. And, the Ravens are going to Kansas City and Jacksonville's going to Buffalo. But, it becomes a situation in which Lamar bet on himself. And how in the world, as an organization, do you not have a deal with him already, knowing how valuable he is and how bad your team has looked without him behind center? And you just, you have to be – it's better to be proactive than reactive. And unfortunately, the Ravens didn't. He ends up hurt. And we'll see where they go from there. But ultimately, Huntley couldn't get it done against Cincinnati. Right, exactly.
They're going home. That's where they're going. And Barbie, Thank you so much for tuning in. Barbie, folks, is the one who makes the amazing graphics for Interstate 70 Sports Media. Does a fantastic job. We wouldn't be where we are without her. So thank you so much for not only everything you do, but for tuning in this evening. And folks, thank you for tuning in so far. Roundabout Sports, the maestro Jeremy Karp alongside Hollywood James Knox. And later on, we're going to have Taylor Michell Coleman on, and we're going to discuss her newest book called A Letter to My Deadbeat Dad, The Facade is Over. And it's going to be an emotional, in-depth interview. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be one hell of a time. We still got a little bit more football to talk about, a little bit more sports to get to. So let's finish off the wild card, James, by talking about our lovely Niners Seahawks game. Man, it was fun seeing Geno in the playoffs while it lasted.
Yeah, and you know what? I give a lot of credit to Geno Smith and that Seattle team this year. Nobody had them even making the playoffs, let alone being where they were at in the division. So, Geno he grew a lot. I don't know where this team goes from there. I mean, defensively is where they need help. You've got, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. You've got Noah Fant, with weapons on offense, and then Kenneth Walker III, who kind of burst on the scene as one of the better running backs in the league. Geno showed a lot and really did persevere through the season. So a lot of credit goes to him and to Pete Carroll, being able to orchestrate a playoff season for them. But the Niners are going to be one of those teams, even with Brock Purdy at the helm, that they're going to be a tough team that nobody wants to play in the playoffs. And I'm beginning to see just the way the leaf is turned, kind of with Purdy, and you've got McCaffrey, and you've got Debo, and you've got George Kittle, and you've got Brandon Ayuk. That team may be the team that represents the NFC in the Super Bowl. They really might be.
I'm predicting a Giants-Niners NFC title game. I think the Niners are the team to beat in the NFC. I said it last week. I feel that just overall they're the most well put together team. And, there's just it creates a lot of questions though when the season is eventually over and you're going to say to yourself, okay, well, now we got the Trey Lance because I know people who are 49er fans that are already like, Trey who? And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And then you're going to have a controversy over Trey Lance or Brock Purdy. But you know what? I say forget that for now. And for now, just relish the moment that you got a guy that's Mr. Irrelevant, who's 100% relevant at the helm as your talented team, the 49ers, are making waves in the NFC. So,
well, all he has to do is not lose the game for them. And in this case, being a game manager rather, there's no shame in that at all. But yes, you're right. He is Mr. Relevant, but if he continues to play the way that he's playing, he will play in the most relevant game of the NFL season, and that's going to be the Super Bowl in Glendale, Arizona, come February. That team right now is just, they're clicking on all cylinders. And, he's not turning the ball over, but he's also not just being a game manager. He's going out there and throwing for 350 yards per game. I mean, this is a kid that, what the hell does he have to lose? He never thought that he would be in the situation he's at. Garoppolo goes down with the ankle injury. Trey Lance breaks his leg or his ankle as well. So, you're at a situation where he's playing with house money, but he's up on the house quite a bit, and he keeps drawing 21. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So all season, and we were just talking about this, all season, the eyes have been on Lamar Jackson. Last pick taken in the first round of 2018, and that interesting quarterback class that had Baker, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, and some guy named Lamar Jackson. And when you take a look at that class, and Lamar's had the most, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are the top of that class, no doubt about it. But Lamar's coming up to a point where he doesn't have an agent. So he bet on himself to where he feels he deserves Russell Wilson money, Kyler Murray money, Deshaun Watson money. Personally, I don't think Kyler Murray should have gotten Kyler Murray money.
Right.
I don't feel Russell Wilson should have gotten what he got. I don't even feel Deshaun Watson should have gotten what he got, because I think all as talented as these guys are, you look at the value in the picks for the future, not just the money that's in the dollar signs. Now, you take Lamar Jackson. People always talk about, well, what if this team drafted Lamar? What if this team? The reason Lamar Jackson is so successful, besides the fact that he's one of the top athletes of this century, is because of the system he's in. Is because John Harbaugh knows how to use Lamar Jackson better than anybody else could. Right. And so I don't know. Here, this is my thing. Lamar Jackson's heading into this offseason, and his future with Baltimore is in question. Now, Baltimore does have 2 tags they can use on him, but the thing of it is the price is going to be so high, and for all we know, Lamar Jackson may just pull a Le'Veon Bell and say, screw you guys, I'm not playing, because he's going to feel that he's worth the money of the quarterbacks I mentioned earlier, and he's going to want a long-term deal. But the problem is, this is where I see it from both sides. You're talking about a quarterback that has an MCL sprain, a grade 2 PCL sprain, and yes, we can joke about the whole running back thing all we want, but at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson without his legs is not a quarterback and is not valuable to anybody, because he can't sit in the pocket and be that guy. He is great because he is such an amazing dual threat. Colin Kaepernick was great until you put him just as a pocket passer. If Michael Vick was just a pocket passer, he wouldn't have been as great. It's because these athletes are just so reliable dual threat guys. Even Daniel Jones, for crying out loud, he's great on the run and as a thrower. Now they just finally learn more control. So that's my whole thing. And with Lamar's leg injuries really starting to add up over the past couple of seasons, and you and I have been in sports long enough to know that if anything, a sprain is worse than a break.
Yeah, it's true because a break can be easily fixed. The sprain takes time, and one tweak the wrong way, and you ultimately irritated or aggravated again. Look, Lamar coming out of Louisville, everybody said, oh well, he's he can't throw the ball. He's not a great passer. Well, he has a rocket for an arm. He really does have a cannon for an arm. The problem is his accuracy is terrible, and if you were just to pin your ears back and play cover 2 and make sure everybody's covered, he's not a very good passer. What makes him so good is the fact that he's mobile and can move. And you're right. It's the same as Colin Kaepernick. It's the same as Michael Vick. It's the same as Steve Young. You can go back in history, like Randall Cunningham, Warren Moon were both mobile quarterbacks too. Now, they could throw the ball and their accuracy was great, but with Lamar, because defenses have to play the fact that he could run the ball, his receivers see more zone than they do man, because with man-to-man coverage, you just turn your back, cover your receiver. Well, if I'm the quarterback and I see that nobody's paying attention to me, I'm going to take off and run. So they're seeing more zone. So he has a little bit of wiggle room, and the windows are a little bit bigger if your accuracy is not that great. So I'm with you though. Lamar bet on himself. He's hurt now. He's had a couple seasons where he's had leg injuries. He may. I don't know if betting on yourself was the best idea here, and he'll still get paid, but there's going to be in the organization in the back of their head going, man, how much money do we give him? How much of it is guaranteed? Because one tweak the wrong way could end his season and ultimately hamper the rest of his career.
I'm about to say it could do worse than just end a season.
Right.
When I look at Lamar betting on himself, I think of two things. One, I do think it was a good idea, and I do think it's a bad idea. And people would be like, well, what the hell side are you on? I'm in the middle, and I'll tell you why on this.
Ride the fence, Jeremy. Ride the fence.
Ride the fence. I'm going to be just on that fence post, and man, is it going to hurt as I'm walking across it. I look at Lamar betting on himself because, yes, Lamar Jackson is a valuable athlete. I'm sorry, we've not seen an athlete like Michael Vick or like Lamar Jackson since Michael Vick, and he's broken Vick's records. He's in that elite dual threat quarterback category that you just mentioned, with your Cam Newtons, your Steve Youngs, your Randall Cunninghams. Now, then you also take into a look at the group the offensive system he's in. I mentioned John Harbaugh has done a great job. Greg Roman has not. Now, only 2 head coaches have gotten fired as of now since the offseason, but 6 offensive coordinators have. Personally, I think Greg Roman needs to be the 7th because I think the Ravens would be much better if they kept Lamar and got rid of Greg Roman. What I'm afraid of is they'll do the opposite. And I think because now this is where I get to the part of why I think Lamar betting on himself turned out bad. It's all a game of chance. Football, sports, money, all of it's just one big crapshoot when it comes to negotiations. And that's why most players have agents to take care of this stuff.
It's true.
And they put these special clauses in contracts, these conditions, incentives, all that. Well, Lamar basically said, look, you gave me this offer. I don't want it. I deserve more. So we're going to see I'll show you what I can do this year. Okay, well, you missed a good chunk of this year. And, heading into the playoff game, you hadn't practiced for 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. So now the Ravens look at you and say, look, we know how talented he is. He's an MVP, a former MVP. But he's never gotten as far in the playoffs. Now his legs are frequently injured. We already have enough issues on offense as far as weapons, sans Mark Andrews. Our entire running back group took a hit. This was the most injured team in the NFL last year.
True.
So, and they have needs they need to address on defense because if you think Marcus Peters is in there for the long haul, you are out of your mind.
Yeah.
So.
Know that with the Rams.
Right, exactly. See, you know perfectly.
Right.
So, offensive coordinators are a dime a dozen. And the Ravens would be smart in this regard to give a generational talent somebody who can really work with him better than anybody else. John Harbaugh is the perfect coach to have. But you still need that great offensive coordinator. You need that guy that's willing to work within Lamar's skill sets. Not make Lamar do things he's not accustomed to doing. Don't force Lamar to throw 40 times in a damn game when Lamar can run for 150 yards on freaking 6 carries.
Well, Greg Roman was garbage as an offensive coordinator in San Francisco too. I mean, for the longest time, it kind of reminds me of like the issues the Steelers had with Matt Canada and the issues that Roethlisberger had with him. It really does kind of remind me of that instance with those two teams. But he's not a very good offensive coordinator, and I know he's had a lot of jobs, but right. That doesn't necessarily make you good. I mean, longevity in the league, and the Ravens have not gotten very far into the playoffs when they have made the playoffs. So, something needs to change there, and it's similar to what's going on in Los Angeles right now with the Rams. McVay's coming back. he announced that. But as you see there, he's firing and getting rid of a lot of his coordinators and assistants because, they struggled this year. The game plan wasn't always there. The scheme was bad. It's time to make changes. And, if a team that won the Super Bowl last year has one bad year and they're making changes, teams that haven't been able to get that far into the playoffs, you would start to think that they would self-evaluate and start to make those changes as well.
And that's why, honestly, like that's one thing I'll give the Rams credit for. I'll definitely give McVay credit for. He's addressing an issue early before it becomes a lingering problem.
Right.
And the Ravens have waited too long for that. And I'm not going to lie. It was kind of like the Browns with Joe Woods, but they got rid of Joe Woods, and then comes Jim Schwartz, and let's go pass rush. All that aside, I have one last question for you, James, with on the topic of football here. Do you see Lamar Jackson suiting up for the Ravens on week 1 of the 2023-24 NFL season?
Yes, ultimately I do, but I think he probably gets some better offers from other teams that are out there, but I think Lamar will probably choose to go back to Baltimore.
I think Lamar will, but at the same time, I think
I'd love to see him in New York with the Jets.
Oh God, keep him out of the AFC. Please put him in the NFC. No, I don't need that.
At least he would be out of your division.
Yeah, but guess what happened when Joe Flacco and the Jets played? No, get him out. Get Ravens quarterbacks out of the AFC, please. Just far away that way. So
who would you rather have, Deshaun Watson or Lamar Jackson? Right now, one for one trade.
One for one trade. I'd go Lamar only because. Does this include the injuries that Lamar has?
Everything. It includes everything.
Shit. I feel like I'd go Lamar just because Deshaun still has a lot of rust to shake off. He had some good games at the end of the season, but he still has rust to shake off. He's going to work extensively with Amari Cooper and Peoples-Jones this offseason and Njoku. And of course, the trade rumors are swirling around about DeAndre Hopkins.
I would take Deshaun Watson over Lamar Jackson right now.
It's just a tough call.
And here's why, real quick. Deshaun Watson,
better quarterback.
He had a year off. He doesn't have the wear and tear on his body. And Lamar Jackson is kind of like that really sharp, like sports car that looks great. It's shiny. It's red. Rev the engine. Sounds great. But when you go to put it in drive, the wheels fall off.
Yeah. I was going to say that's true. And that's where I was kind of getting at too. I was like, well, Deshaun Watson also hadn't played in 700 days prior to coming back. So if there is one benefit to it, it is the fact that he is still healthy and he didn't,
Well, we know he takes care of his body too because he gets massages on the regular.
Oh God! Oh boo, boo, God.
Boo that man! Boo him!
Boo that man! I throw something, but this is a nice laptop. Okay. Well,
please don't. I feel bad enough.
Right. With that,
excuse me.
Think it's about that time, James. What you think?
Yeah.
All right, folks. I'm going to say this again. First off, welcome to Roundabout Sports. I'm the maestro, Jeremy Karp, alongside one of the most exhausted men in the business, Hollywood James Knox. And it is about time for our main event, our featured interview of the evening. And this is a big honor for myself, for James. There's a lot of emotion, a lot behind the scenes to this. It's something that it's an interview that we haven't really done on this show much, if you will say. So the book that we're going to be talking about is called A Letter to My Deadbeat Dad, The Facade is Over. It's by Taylor Michell Coleman. You can find it on Amazon. As you can tell, this is from Amazon. It has the 5-star review, so that should tell you one great sign right there off the bat. James and I both were sent copies of it and had the pleasure of reading it, and it's just
and on Amazon, if you don't have a Kindle, don't buy the Kindle version.
Yeah. So
I almost did that, but no, Jeremy, I will step aside and let you have the interview here as I'm kind of battling my body here. But
Yeah.
I will remind everybody tomorrow night, tune into the Strike Zone at 6 p.m. We'll preview the Blues game, and hopefully we'll have a Cardinals trade for Pablo Lopez by then. But I just want to say thanks to everybody tuning in as well. And yeah, you will really enjoy this interview. I think everybody will with Taylor Michell Coleman. She's a very reflective young lady. She's astute, and she's overcome quite a lot, persevered life. So, Jeremy, I will hand it off to you. Jeremy, I'm very gracious. Thank you for handling this tonight, and we will talk later on, my brother.
We will talk later on, brother. Be well. You know, I'm always praying for you, and we love you. So take care, James.
I appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night, James. All right, folks. With that said, it's my pleasure to bring on the Roundabout Sports this evening. The one, the only, amazing author herself, Taylor Michell Coleman.
Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm doing okay, Taylor. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. You know, I was very gracious, or I was honored when you had said that you would be excited to be doing this interview this evening. When I first heard that you had wrote this book, you know, I definitely wanted to know more about it. You are the daughter of Cardinal Hall of Famer Vince Coleman.
Yes.
And, you know, and you mentioned this in the prologue of your book, you know, the first thing that comes to people's minds, like, wait, the Vince Coleman, the one that set all those rookie stolen base records, you know, one of the all-time great base stealers and everything. And you had mentioned how a lot of times you just nodded your head and acknowledged it. But the thing of it is, you said for 20 years, you hid a lot of emotions back.
Yeah, pretty much everything that is in that book I've held in.
Why for so long?
So something actually happened earlier last year that inspired me to tell my story. And that incident was when I saw him in the store for the first time after 20 years of abandonment. So after that happened, I actually reached out to a family member and told her about the incident. And during that conversation, I learned that I had so much family on his side that I never knew of because he wasn't in my life. And after all that transpired, I just had this feeling inside of me, almost like God told me, like, now is your time to speak and to tell your story. And so that's what ultimately made that happen.
You know, when people first hear about something like this, you hear it a lot when it comes to athletes, you know, and we're supposed to hold athletes to a higher standard. It's just kind of that natural thing. You know, you put them on that pedestal. And yet when a story like this comes out, and as we're about to delve into it, you know, it changes the perspective on everything.
Yeah.
When you were in the process of writing this book, were you prepared for the fact of what repercussions, not just for your life, but for his, this could lead to?
Yes, I did. I thought about it a lot, actually, but you know, I want him to change ultimately, and I also want to be the voice for everyone who's been abandoned but hasn't had their voice heard. You know, I think like deadbeat fathers, deadbeat mothers, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of cases of abandonment, and yet we don't really talk about it at all. So I knew I was taking a risk, but you know, nothing changes if you don't take risks. So it was a big risk, but a risk I was willing to take.
You know, I love the quote you included when you talked about what Dr. Maya Angelou stated. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you.
Yeah.
And, you know, to imagine 20 years of untold stories, you know,
yeah,
that repression, how were you able to go on with an everyday life?
In terms of what? Like,
in just terms of like family, in terms of just, because this involves abandonment,
Mhm.
You state how your father abandoned you when you were 8 years old,
Right. Yeah.
and you're 28 now.
Yeah.
And so, what was it like having to, live through those 20 years thinking to
Oh,
yourself, why?
yeah.
Why
Okay.
me? Why did this have to happen to me?
Yeah, I think when it initially happened, I was upset, but I was so young that honestly, I don't really remember a lot of that. Um, so it was definitely hard at times, where people would ask, like, where's your dad? If I had friends that came over, people just asking about that family aspect, it was definitely difficult. And as I say in my book, like when people put two and two together and they ask if he was my dad, I would always say yes. Um, but it was still difficult to do that because I had to, put a smile on and pretend that he was in my life and that everything was fine. Um, but luckily, my mother is amazing and she did everything that she could to kind of put a Band-Aid over that. And I think with the love that I received from her and from my grandparents and other family and friends, I just chose to persevere forward and I didn't really let it bring me down or affect me negatively. So,
When you first met, or when you talk about in your book when your
mhm,
mother first met your father,
yes.
he was already with somebody else, but
Yeah.
he had said it wasn't really like a legal paper type
He said
marriage,
it
if you
was,
will.
yeah, he said the marriage was only on paper and that they were separated.
And when, after a few months, when your mom found out she was pregnant with you,
Mhm.
his reaction to the news was extremely disappointing in her eyes because he said, "What am I going to tell my wife?"
Right.
You know, I, I'm trying to think of like just how one could react to him hearing that type of news for the first time. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing your mom sat down with you and told you how that all played out.
Yeah, there were because again, I was so young, so there's a lot that I don't remember. I wasn't born yet, so I didn't know about any of it. So I had to confide in her multiple times to help me write the story and fill in those missing details.
Now, Lynette eventually divorced Vince.
Hmm.
And apparently, in the book, you talk about how she talked to your mother
Hmm.
and said about how he dishonored our vows.
Yep.
There were many other women involved.
Yep.
And first, Jared, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. So this was a constant thing in his life from the sound of it.
Yes, from what I was told, and it's also interesting because there was a lady that commented under one of the first platforms that posted about my book. And she said, I'll be honest, she's not lying. And then she said, I worked at I think it's called the Adams Mark Hotel or somewhere.
Yep,
Yes,
Adams
there
Mark
was
Hotel downtown.
yeah, she was like, I used to work there, and he was always in and out of hotel rooms with different women. And she said they were dogs. That's what she called them. So, yeah.
We talk about athletes having to be held to a higher standard.
Mhm.
And I think one thing is, it's officially acknowledged by sources such as Wikipedia. And, I know people will be like, well, it's not the most reliable, but at the same time, it's where most people go to find out the info
Mm,
that Vince Coleman has 2 children.
yep.
But you say, and your mother has said otherwise, stating that he has 5 children, which
Yes,
includes you, of
that we
course.
know of. I mean, to the point that you just made about him getting around per se, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if someone randomly messaged me and was like, I'm your brother or sister. Like, I really wouldn't be surprised. But yes, so I am his third child. So Vincent Jr. and Lance are my two older brothers. Those were Lynette's two sons that she had with our dad. And then I'm my mother's only child. And then just last year, I found out that he has two children with his current wife, Denise, Koya and Capiolani Coleman. So I have a baby sister. Well, she's 18, but a baby sister and a baby brother.
Sister's a baby sister.
Yeah, that I haven't met. And that hurts a lot because I want them in my life.
Do you feel that because of the strained relationship, the almost non-existent relationship you have now with Vince, you won't be able to have a relationship with those other siblings?
Yes, I'm definitely scared of that. And honestly, it's not so much him, it's more so his wife. I've never met her, but what I'll say is my older brothers have, and they say, quote, "She has completely brainwashed our father." And I'm not, giving him any slack. Like, at the end of the day, you're a grown man. You've chosen to do the things that you've done. And no woman or anyone should be able to come into your life and cut you off from your children. Like, that's a decision that you made. But at the same time, yes, I have heard that she's very controlling. And I am scared that she possibly has poisoned their minds and made them think ill of me. So I don't know, but one can only hope.
Yeah. At what point did you start? Your mom has been such a rock in your life, and to imagine what she's endured having to go through all this.
Yeah.
When did you start beginning to question, where was daddy? Where's my dad at? At what point,
Yeah.
Did that come up?
I don't honestly, I don't remember. Like, I remember, I say this in my book, I remember sitting on the floor and taking out a photo album, and I was cutting his face and body out of pictures that we had together because I was sad at the fact that, he wasn't around. I'm pretty sure she told me something along those lines, but I don't remember that exact moment at all. I only remember that specific memory. And from then, I didn't really question why he wasn't around. And I never questioned anything that my mom told me. We kind of just went on like he didn't exist.
You mentioned that in your book that your brother replied something along the lines of, he thinks you and mom want money from him.
Mm-hmm.
And you very much reiterated to the readers of the book that in no time did either of you ask your father for money.
Right.
And as an athlete, one thing you always try to do is cover up potential scandals, issues, things that could portray you in a negative light. And especially, your father playing in St. Louis, a baseball town, one of the more popular players in the 80s and 90s. But you said that he was never there for Christmas, your birthdays, Thanksgiving.
Yep.
How was it for you being there, being at all these family gatherings, all these events, but just not having your father there with you and your mother?
Yeah. It definitely hurt more so when
Nope. Well, it appears we have some technical difficulties. Bear with me, folks. That one of these things happens.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
It's okay. We were just saying about what it was like being with them with all those holidays and events, without Vince there.
I think it hurt when I would start to notice other people with their fathers and them talking about like how proud their dad is or the things they get to do with their dad. When I was reminded of it, it hurt. But honestly, like seeing my mom there out in the stands or wherever she would be, that made me happy. Like that's all that I cared about. So I didn't really think like, I didn't ever really think like, oh, I wish I had my dad here. Like I just wanted my mom there.
How close did your mom have any other was there any other father figure in your life, or was it your mom really that
Um,
true
yeah,
rock?
not really. She was married at one point, but it didn't last very long. So that's the only other man that I ever called dad. So yeah, pretty much no. It was always just me and her.
And we've talked about how your mom is a woman of integrity,
Hmm.
and just how much this affected her as much as, if not more than it affected you.
Yeah.
Did you ever have one of those conversations with your mother about just how she got through these trying times?
Um, Not really, honestly, no. Um, like I said in my book, she was always very strong, and I never once heard her, like complain about not having someone around to help out, or I never saw her hurting, although I'm sure she did. She was always very good about just, I guess, keeping those things kind of under the rug and staying strong for me. Um, but I'm sure probably going forward, we'll discuss it.
You mentioned, that even though you don't live in the St. Louis area, you're a big time Cardinal fan.
Mhm.
You love coming up to games. And you were at opening day last year, for example, and
Yes.
the energy was just ecstatic for you.
Mhm.
And was it too long after this when you were going to, I believe, one of the Cardinal stores?
So that was actually the day before.
That was the day before.
Yeah.
Do you care to mind to delve into kind of that story about
Yes,
inside the store?
I'd love to. um, so yeah, until that day, it had been 20 years since I had ever talked to my dad. He did not call me once. He never sent a text message, nothing. So we arrived at the Westin right across from the stadium. And we went to the Cardinal store to get some new gear and get some new jerseys and stuff like that, like we always do. And, I was in a great mood, like, didn't have a care in the world. And I was looking at either some t shirts or coffee mugs, I can't remember. And I bumped into a little boy, and he was like, "Oh, sorry." And I was like, "Oh, sorry." And I remember thinking to myself, like, "Oh, he's so cute and polite." And I went about my way. He went about his. And maybe like 30 seconds later, I hear a voice behind me, and I knew that voice from somewhere. And I turn around and I see my dad walking along with the little boy that I had bumped into, who was my baby brother, who I had never met before. And I just, I just almost felt dizzy, honestly. And I just immediately started looking around for my mom. And once I spotted her, she knew something was wrong. And I was like, "Mom," and she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Dad's here." And that's when she said, "Where?" And I pointed to the front of the store. And yeah, I can go into more detail, but yeah.
I was gonna say, did he talk to you?
So yeah, so we this is all in the book, by the way, but we walked up to him and my mom said, "Hey, Mr. Coleman," or "Excuse me, Mr. Coleman." And he looked up, and I think at first he thought we were fans of his. And then as he, as the memories came back and he recognized her, he was like, oh, hey. And I was standing like maybe 6 or 7 feet in front of him. And I was like, hi, Dad. And he didn't say anything. He walked up to me, patted my back a few times, and then went and stood right back where he was. And he goes, I don't see you holding any Coleman gear in there. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you haven't been in my life for 20 years and you think I would go to the store and buy your jersey and support you? Like, I think that statement alone just shows how cocky and evil he is. But yeah, that's the first thing he said. I don't see you holding any Coleman gear in there. And I was kind of like, Dad, it's been 20 years now. That's all you have to say? Like, and he kept saying, talk to your mother. Every time I would ask him a question, he would say, talk to your mother. And at one point I kind of lost it and called him some names. That's all in the book as well. And I was crying. Like, he showed absolutely no remorse. Like, he didn't apologize. He didn't ask me how I was. It was nothing. He just stood there like a robot. And then he ended up eventually leaving the store with my little brother, never to be seen again.
When we talk about throughout this whole journey where you've had 20 years of all this repressed emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and you're the daughter of a single mother,
Mm-hmm.
and you state how proud you are of that fact.
Yes.
Because as much as you want to have that father figure, you're not ashamed in the slightest of anything in regards to your mother because you're so proud of her.
Right.
For those tuning in, listening, that whether they've been in this scenario
Mm-hmm.
or have never or haven't truly felt this, like, how much strength did it take for you to finally let out all of this?
Yeah. It definitely took a lot of courage, for sure. Like I said before, I knew I was taking a risk by sharing all this information. But I think I kind of just, especially after meeting the family that I had met on his side and reconnecting with them, that was such a inspiring and like heartfelt experience. So I kind of, it wasn't necessarily about strength. It was more so just me knowing that it was my time and that it was okay to tell my truth. I think honestly, more so post-publish is what requires strength because, as you know, on the internet, people love to have that keyboard courage and say, all these negative things and evil things, and they try to tear you down. So that takes a special kind of person, I think, to be able to endure that every single day and not let it get to you. Because there's definitely a lot of those out there.
How much backlash did you face when you were both in the process and even in post when it came to this book?
I didn't receive any backlash during writing the book. It was once it was published, and especially after the first platform posted it, there were a lot of nasty comments, people saying that I just want money, or that, you're almost 30 years old, you should just get over it. I've had people, curse me out, curse my book, anything they can say, or to your point earlier about Wikipedia, she's lying. Vince only has 2 sons. He doesn't have a daughter, and they just think they know my life and my father better than I do. And then on top of that, there's the whole putting athletes up on pedestals. So it's like, even after sharing this information, there's some people that still choose to idolize him, because he was so, he's still perfect in some people's eyes.
You dedicate your book to anybody who's been victimized or abandoned by the people who created you.
Mm-hmm.
How much did that message mean for you to really, because this book is not so much of a slander as much as it is a truth reveal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also conveys the message of just knowing that, and it's something that's promoted a lot about never being alone, and that,
Yes.
you are loved, and that you're there to support those who've been on that same boat as you have.
Mm-hmm.
So how much did that mean for you to decide, hey, I'm dedicating this to basically you all that are in this scenario?
Yeah, it meant a lot. Um, I mean, this book is very special to me. And I think one thing I've learned is that when you go through certain things in life, I think you're meant to share your story in order to help other people. And I know that my story is very powerful. And unfortunately, I also know that there's a lot of people who can relate to being victimized or abandoned, by your parents. Even, like I say in my book, like, even if you've been adopted by the greatest people in the world, there's still something inside of you that knows that you have been abandoned by the people that actually created you. And sometimes those people, um, they grew up feeling self-conscious, or they become people pleasers. Like, there's all these different um, characteristics and consequences of being abandoned. And so I didn't want to limit it to just people who can relate to being a deadbeat dad. Like, someone whose mom has never been around knows the pain that I felt. Someone who's been adopted knows the pain that I felt. So I wanted it to be as inclusive as possible. And it's important to me that I advocate for all of those scenarios, not just mine, because there's a lot of us out here.
Before the show, James talked about, some of his personal life when it comes to themes that fit this.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned myself being, somebody who was adopted. I was adopted at a month old, and the woman that gave birth to me basically just wrote a note saying she wouldn't have a claim on me and kind of just, left. And I'm blessed and fortunate to be where I'm at today.
Right.
Now you eventually left St. Louis, like, you live in far, far away land.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you live in Texas now. And what was that like for you, moving away from where you had grown up and where your dad made a big name for himself as a baseball star, while
Yeah.
not having anything to do with you or your mother?
When I left St. Louis, so we didn't move directly from St. Louis to Dallas. I just don't have that piece in the book. We actually lived in Maryland for about 5 years. So switching schools at the time, I was 14 years old. So I went to two different high schools. I was actually excited about it. It wasn't something that hurt me, and it didn't necessarily make me think about my father. At the time, I was excited for a change and to make new friends, and that's exactly what happened. So, um, and in addition to that, Maryland is very diverse too. It's much more diverse than St. Louis, Missouri. And so I also was looking forward to that, and looking back on it, I appreciate that, because St. Louis is quite segregated in a way. So
Did you ever have to go seek any type of therapeutic help to
mhm.
cope with the abandonment issues that you were having to go through?
Yes. So when I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I do recall seeing, pretty sure it was a psychologist. Um, Now I'm pretty sure I only saw her like once or twice. So looking back on it, I probably should have stuck with it. I think it would have helped a lot in terms of my development. Um, but I have been interested in seeking or finding a new therapist here, actually in the DFW area, to talk about that piece of my life. Because besides writing this book, that was really my first time ever talking about it. And honestly, writing the book has been therapeutic for me in that way. So yeah, I would like to find someone to continue unpacking all of this, because it's not easy.
No, I honestly, I go to a support group at a local church every week to deal
Mhm.
with a lot of personal issues. So I can understand that. When it comes to writing this book,
Mhm.
what was your ultimate goal?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, when it was all published, when it was all said and done, sent out there, and later I'll put the link for folks that want to purchase it. It's out on Amazon.
Mhm.
But, you talk about you talk about different aspects of your life, whether it be for those that were in your life or those that weren't.
Right.
But what was your ultimate goal that you wanted people to take away with this book?
I think there's two main things. So one, I wanted to advocate for everyone who can relate to this kind of abandonment. And I want people to know that they're not alone, for one, and two, that it's okay to talk about these things. Because I think a lot of times we get scared or we're embarrassed to talk about that piece of our lives. So I want people to know that it is okay to talk about it. And secondly, I want to bring awareness to this issue that we have of absent fathers and absent mothers and abandonment as a whole. I want these adults to be held accountable, because a lot of times they've just been able to do it and get away with it without any, repercussions or anything, and that's not okay. I mean, if you bring a life into this world, your number one job is to love and protect that person. And if you haven't done that, you deserve to be held accountable for that. So it was those two main things.
You write this book, and it showcases over 2 decades of feelings, emotions, struggles, and you almost basically have mentioned about how far separate your father and you have gone since. I have this picture here of you both.
Yep.
Um, and obviously, times have changed a complete 180 since the time. Do you remember how old you were in this picture?
I was probably like 6 or 7 years old.
That's it. So, honestly, it was not too far away from when he did leave.
Hmm.
Um, in all this time, how was your mother able to help? Because you were an only child from your mother.
Yeah.
Did she ever receive any type of financial support, anything? How did she get through raising a daughter on her own?
Yeah. So I include all these details in the book as well. So my father did pay child support at first, I'll say. He paid for my tuition. I went to a private school in Missouri. So he paid for that. And then when I was around, I think I was in middle school. So I think I was like 13 years old around that time. Um, he reduced the child support to 175 a month. So in the book, I kind of do some math too, because I'm like, that's a bit sad to say the least, that you are a multimillionaire and you are only giving the mother of your child $175 a month to support your child. So instead of doing that monthly, he opted to do a one-time payment of $16,000, and that was it. Everything else, my mother, her, hard-earned money paid for it. And I make that very clear in the book too, as well, because she has, climbed the ladder in corporate America, and she's about to climb it even higher. And she's just been, a phenomenal, successful woman. And the things that she has, I don't want people to think that my father did that, or that my father had anything to do with the success I've created for myself. I made sure to include the good that he did do, because I think that's fair. That's a part of the story. And I told the truth, but that's as far as it goes.
When you were processing starting writing this book,
Mm-hmm.
was your mother the first person you consulted about it?
Yes, absolutely. Because I was putting a very vulnerable piece of her life out there too, right? So I wanted to make sure that she was okay and comfortable with me doing that. And she told me, if writing this book will help you heal, I support you 100%. So,
Was there any from your family, the family that you're in contact with, did any of them know beforehand as well that you were going to write this book? And if they did they have any, obviously not backlash, but more so a warning or a cautionary heads up towards you about it?
Yeah, actually, no, I hadn't talked to anyone else, only my mom. So,
Well, we have Haley Phillips who's tuning in. Thank you so much. And she says your mom is an inspiration to all single moms out there.
thank you, Haley.
And and of course, Aaliyah tuned in earlier and she sent a heart your way. And it shows the impact that both you and your mother have made. And Herb, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you so much. Always appreciate you and everything you do. So it shows the inspiration that you and your mom have made to inspire those who do face the same issues that you and her faced.
Right.
Because it's not something that you faced by yourself, and it's not something she faced by herself.
Right.
You faced it together. How are you both? What I want to ask, and I know this is in the book as well, but like when your father acknowledged the fact that and I don't want to say the actual word on the air for this sake, but that's your blank daughter now.
Yeah.
And that was it. How do you react from that? How was your initial thought process?
So I'll say that was probably the one piece of information she shared with me that got to me big time. Honestly, I didn't have words when she told me that he said that. And I was not in a good mood for like several days after that, because that's all I could think about. And it just made me feel the weight of his rejection all over again. And I just can't fathom how you can say that to the mother of your child, like knowing you have an 8-year-old little girl wanting to call her dad, just wanting to say hi. And that's what you say. And you don't even say goodbye. You just block the number. So I can't imagine. I mean, my mom told me she never shared it with me because she didn't want to hurt me. So I can't imagine how I would have felt if I heard that at 8 years old. I'm glad I was an adult.
And we have some more comments, very supportive ones. Linda tuning in saying you have her support, and this is something that you also mentioned in your book. Like at the end of the book, especially I think the special edition, it has a lot of quotes from a lot of people that have read it.
Yes.
And it mentions about, and I take Linda's comment right here about how I watched Vince play all the time and I didn't know. That seems to be, and Joey, who's also tuning in, talks about how much of an inspiration you are and that you both have talked. And this is one thing that is kind of one of the difficulties of trying to publish something like this, because it is almost you against the world, because you talk about a multi-million-dollar athlete, whoever it may be, or celebrity, or in any regard, and it's the he said, she said, or she said, he said, or anything in regards to the life that the public doesn't know about, because the person has done their best to erase that. And Kylie, I believe, or Kyle says the nuclear family is underappreciated in today's society. Being from a broken home herself, all I can say is I got lucky being raised where my mother moved us to, rather than staying where my dad lived. Parents get selfish and give up too easy. It's not about your parents once you procreate, or it's not about you, parents, once you procreate. And I think that's a message you're also trying to convey in the book, is that, when you become a parent, it's about the child.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing, but it is about the child, because you just created life. I believe it was, if I can find it, because I'm honored to have, a copy of it. And I know it's from Ephesians 6:4. Do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Was biblical verses something that really helped you get through these times as well, especially when writing the book?
Yeah, for sure. There was also this like spiritual worship video. They're just singing songs. But when I was writing this book, I would listen to it every single night, and it would just help me feel better, and just remind me that, God will always be behind me, supporting me. And it just made me feel better about writing the book as a whole.
And Linda shares the same sentiment as the previous comment. And thank you all so much. Please keep submitting your comments. I'm with Taylor Michell Coleman, the daughter of Cardinal Hall of Famer Vince Coleman, and she shares with us her new book that you can find on Amazon, A Letter to My Deadbeat Dad, The Facade is Over. And yes, that's from the Amazon site. You can, interestingly enough, see the 5-star review that is at the bottom of the screen. What was it like getting this book published?
Yeah, so I self-published. And one of the reasons why I did that is because typically when you go through a traditional publisher, they pretty much tear your manuscript apart and add in fluff and help you write it. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted this book to be as authentic and raw, literally like you're opening up a diary sort of feel. And I didn't want them to skew that or mess that up. So yeah, I chose to self-publish, but it was actually a pretty simple, easy process. I would do it again for sure.
What's the next step? You got the messages that you've tried for so long to get out there. You finally get it out there on multiple platforms, and on perhaps one of the busiest, if not the busiest, shopping site in the world. And it conveys the powerful messages that you've been trying to say for 20 years. So what's next for Taylor?
So in terms of this book and the impact that I want to make overall, I would like to find, either some organizations that center around single fathers or single mothers, as well as some like boys or girls homes that I can volunteer at, or places that I could possibly like do speeches on about my book, because I want it to be more than the book. Like I want to make a physical impact on the world and meet, as many people as I can to spread that message. So I've actually talked about this with one of my girlfriends who lives in Dallas, and she totally supports the idea and wants to help me do it as well. So that's my next goal in terms of that. But in terms of writing, I'm actually working on another book that I hope to have published by late springtime. So that's what I'm working on currently.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, with your current book, you now is this. I have the special edition. Is there more than just one edition of the book that people can purchase?
No. So the special edition basically took over the original. So after I published the book, I realized there was a lot more that I had to say. And so, yeah, I added in those extra chapters and thought it would be good to add pictures at the end as well. So yeah, there's only one version.
Okay. And I know there, like you said, there's pictures of you and your father. Have you thought to yourself, if he were to get his hands and read this book, of how he might react, whether it be in the negative way, positive way? I mean, has that crossed your mind?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would say my dream would be for him to read it and realize that he needs to change. But I don't think that's going to happen. So what's gone through my mind, honestly, is I picture him being pissed off about it. I picture his wife not being happy about it. And yeah, that's all I can say. Knowing the type of person that he is and the things that he's done, not only to me, but even when he was a baseball player, like there's tons of articles about the stuff he did while he was a baseball player, like throwing firecrackers at fans, for instance. So he's always kind of been this type of person. So I don't see him, seeing this book and feeling any sort of empathy or compassion or, anything like that. I don't think he has those qualities, to be honest.
Despite everything that's happened in your life and in your mother's life, all the struggles, all the hardships, the emotional trauma, the mental pain, physical, are you still able and willing to welcome him back into your life if that chance comes?
Absolutely. I would do it in a heartbeat.
My follow-up on that would be, how so? It's a hard thought to fathom given the circumstances, and to try to hopefully inspire others that are in the same boat. What makes you willing to, and convincingly so, to be able to?
All I've ever wanted since he left when I was 8 years old is for him to be in my life. That's all I've ever wanted. That's all I've ever asked of him. So it would be a dream come true if he did that. I know at this point I should hate him, but at the end of the day, he's my dad and I have unconditional love for him. So, yeah.
Well, we can't predict the future, but we can only pray for it to be as positive as it can be. And, this book definitely has done so much for both yourself, your family, and, those who are seeking this type of inspiration. I mean, I've read the reviews from Amazon, and people are saying how it's a beautiful book, very inspiring, it's courageous. And one word that and James mentioned this, and it's one word that is throughout this, when describing you, is resilient. What makes you so resilient?
That's a good question. I think just the way I was raised, I honestly think it has a lot to do with seeing my mom, work hard every day and do all of it, all that comes with being a parent, her doing it all herself, seeing that every single day, my whole life, that makes you a strong and tough person. And I've never really seen her go through something that defeated her. Like, she always jumps back and has always been resilient herself. So I kind of acquired those traits. But I also think when you are abandoned, sometimes you acquire the trait of like wanting to always do stuff on your own and not asking for help, and just having that like I got it mindset, or I'll get it done, or I got this, don't help me sort of mindset. And I think I have that as well, which I know sometimes isn't a good thing, but I think it also has caused me to be resilient in that way. So
one last thing I have to ask. You said that you're always willing, you have that unconditional love for Vince and welcome your dad back into your life. And I've referred to him by just the first name or as dad, just because of the strain of the relationship you both have. My thing is, in your book, the title is A Letter to Your Deadbeat Dad. How are you able to convey such hopefulness of reconciliation when that's the first thing people see?
So I didn't want to sugarcoat anything in the book. I mean, at the end of the day, he is very much so a deadbeat dad. There is no denying that. But at the same time, and I know it sounds weird and it's kind of hard to explain, I can recognize both things. I can recognize that he is a jerk and is a deadbeat dad, but on the same, at the same time, I also recognize that he's my dad, and because of the type of person that I am, and I think because he is my father, I still have love for him. So the two kind of don't correlate, if that makes sense.
Right. No, it does. And Carmen, who left comments saying about how remarkable you are. Once again, there's that word resilient coming into the equation, and courageous. And, I've put the comments on, and it's been nothing but positive. And I guess I do have one final question in this regard. So, we've talked all about the book, about what you've gone through. What is your message from your heart? What is your message to those tuning in, to those who may, even if they do never see this interview, but to those who will see it and are watching? What is your message to those who have gone through what you've gone through?
Yeah. So, like I said before, I want everyone to know that, first off, they're not alone. There are so many people in this world that can relate to what you've gone through. And so don't ever feel like no one can relate, right? Like there's so many people that can relate to this. And I also want them to most importantly know in addition to not being alone, but knowing their worth and remembering to love themselves, because that's something I've struggled with. And when you've been abandoned or seen someone walk out of your life, you think, well, they don't love me, so why would anyone love me? Or you sometimes, I talk about this at the end of the book too, but sometimes you may exude like the characteristics of being a people pleaser. Like you're always doing so much for others because you want them to see your heart and who you are on the inside. So I just want to remind people who may exude those qualities or that have a lack of confidence or lack of self-worth, that you are worthy, you are loved, and it's so important to love yourself, and to set boundaries is necessary as well, with people who may try to make you feel like you're not. That's not the case.
I love that. Taylor, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. For those that want to purchase the book, I doubt the link will. Yeah, I figured as such, but the link is on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and you can purchase the book called A Letter to My Deadbeat Dad. The Facade is Over. You can purchase it in hardcover for $25.99 or the paperback version for $16.99. I highly recommend it. I know if James was on here still co-hosting with me at the moment, he would highly recommend it as well. Aaron, with great appreciation for the advice you've given, but I just want to personally say how much of a pleasure it was having you on the show.
Thank you.
And I look forward to talking with you later.
Yes.
And most importantly, among everything, keep inspiring people, because that's what the world needs more of.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. I plan to.
I look forward to it. Taylor Michell Coleman here on Roundabout Sports, ladies and gentlemen. Taylor, you take care and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Well, folks, that will do it for this week's edition of Roundabout Sports, presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media. Remember, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, so many more places. And we have the NAMI hotline, or the helpline, at 1-800-950-NAMI. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. That's 1-800-950-NAMI. And of course, as always, we put the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline on, and you dial 988. And the line's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 on leap years. Understand that you're never alone, and there's always somebody out there who loves you. And you can also be that voice for somebody else who needs to be loved. I want to thank Taylor Michell Coleman for being on the show this evening. And James, you just know that we're all praying for you. We love you. You stay strong, buddy. And thank you all for tuning in this evening. And we'll see you next week. And always remember, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your lives worth reading. Good night, everybody.